Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming to the gigantically oversized Wachsman-sponsored panel here. I am so excited to have a conversation today about a version of the internet you haven't heard about yet. You thought you were in crypto. You thought you were in blockchain. You're going to hear about something totally new. We have a major announcement from a true celebrity in our industry. Mike, why don't you tell the audience here a little about yourself, then I'll introduce myself and we'll go from there.
Yeah, sure. I'm Mike Brock. I lead our newest business unit at Block, TBD, which is focused on ultimately driving towards a more decentralized world and giving access to the decentralized monetary system, building on-ramps and off-ramps. Hope some people have seen our white paper and some of the work that we're doing, and I'm also super excited to talk about what our next step is here today.
Mike, just before we even get into that, you've been a real proponent for Bitcoin, for crypto at Square and now renamed Block. You've been pushing forward this at one of the leading consumer finance companies in the United States and really the world. Has that journey been something that's been invigorating to the team there? Because I know it's been an inspiration for what you're about to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, being the first publicly traded company to do Bitcoin in 2017 was, it was pretty. I think it was a pretty big deal for the world. Internally, it was also a really big deal. It was a big shift in our company to do something that at the time seemed incredibly risky and scary for a lot of people. But I think we recognize that there's something happening in the world, that people are increasingly losing confidence in the traditional financial system. And there is just a reality that like technology advances, it can do things better. We think Bitcoin does money better than traditional fiat currency. And we think that the internet needs a native currency. And we think Bitcoin is the native currency of the internet, and we see the amazing impact it's having around the world. I think actually, like outside of the United States, it's actually a really important area to pay attention to. Like we see, I was just at a conference in Oslo where I was hearing from members of Alexei Navalny's party in Russia, people fighting dictatorship in Togo in Africa, Venezuela. Like there are real people fighting for real freedom using technologies like Bitcoin to sustain funding in the face of malign governments that are ultimately enemies of freedom. And the fact that Bitcoin is actually helping push back is like super inspiring, and I think really validates the power of this technology to bring about positive change and build a better world. So, yes.
Well, Mike, I'm glad you have been a proponent of Bitcoin, but I've been a consultant in the Bitcoin space since 2014. I fell in love with it, founded the first firm worldwide to focus exclusively on marketing and consulting in the Bitcoin space in 2015. And my point is, over these years, I have noticed that a lot of people, including people who come to these conferences, are trying to sell a vision of blockchain is necessary for anything to move forward, that you need to have a cryptocurrency of some sort to solve any sort of problem. Your organization is, I'm going to call it to some extent, the adults in the room. Maybe they wear fancy hoodies, but they are the adults in the room. Do you think you need a blockchain or a crypto for everything?
No. I think that's ridiculous. I think the argument that blockchain and decentralization is synonymous is one of the silliest fallacies that has emerged in our industry. I think there are lots of exciting things happening in this industry. There are lots of amazing innovations that are happening. But at the end of the day, decentralization, which I think is good, and I think we do need to advance decentralization. I think the centralization of information and data and platforms in the world, that these really huge tech companies that control an outsized amount of the internet and all of the services that we use, I think there's real dangers to that centralization, real tail risks that exist, real dangers that power could fall into the wrong hands. And I think that people in this space, like that are looking for ways to push forward decentralization, are on the right path, at least from like I think a moral and ethical and sort of in like their thought process that this stuff has to be decentralized is correct. But I think we need to make sure that we're pursuing technology that's fit to purpose towards that end. And I don't think blockchain is the answer in all cases, no.
Okay, so you guys have been pretty busy, my understanding is a TBD. What have you been working on? What can you tell us today for the first time?
Well, I am super happy to announce publicly for the first time that we are launching a new initiative, what we call Web 5, which is what we believe is a true shape of a true decentralized web built upon real, well-tested, computer science and information infrastructure. We believe that this is the path forward for building truly decentralized identity, decentralized applications, and ultimately like decentralized information storage on the internet.
Heard about Web 3. We all know about Web 2. What is Web 5 and what happened to Web 4?
Well, it's 2 versions better than Web 3. So that's one thing it has going for it. But more to the point, not to belabor the joke too much, we are really trying to push forward a conversation about decentralization that we think is needed. Like I think what people want in Web 3 are the right things to want.
So what do you think? What do you think they want? So we hear about the internet of value. We hear about an internet that's more interactive and more decentralized.
Yeah, these are all good things to want, right? Like we should want to have more decentralization, which means more competition, which means more safety from government censorship, government overreach. We want ultimately all of these things. These are good things to want. This is really a conversation around what technologies are fit to purpose. And I don't think that renting block space in all cases is a really good idea for decentralized applications. I think what we're pushing forward with Web 5, and I admit it's a provocative challenge to I think a lot of the assumptions around what it means to decentralize the internet, is really actually just back to basics. Like, I mean, we have technologies that can decentralize. Like, I mean, BitTorrent exists, the Tor exists. Like we can build like whisper networks and service discovery mechanisms that use well-tested decentralizing technology. The internet itself is a decentralizing force. I mean, TCP/IP allows us to build decentralized computer networks all around the world. That's what the internet is. And the answer to a more decentralized web exists in the foundations of the web itself. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to push some of these concepts forward and say, look, like we need to kind of rebalance our assumptions here. I'm not saying that a lot of the technologies that are being developed today in this space aren't interesting and don't have like the ability to advance technological capabilities. But I do think that this sort of all or nothing belief that like putting everything onto the blockchain is a really like healthy way to think about it.
So do you think Web 5, I should say, can coexist with Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies?
I mean, yeah. I mean, we're building the Web 5 infrastructure ultimately on top of our decentralized identity infrastructure, which is ultimately secured by the Bitcoin blockchain. So there is a relationship there, and there's nothing about this technology, just to be quite clear, that like precludes like using any other blockchains with it or any other types of tokens in the future. I mean, this is like, I mean, we're not building opinionated infrastructure here, right? Like our TBDEX protocol is not opinionated about like Bitcoin or Ethereum or any of the other chains. I mean, if people want to use these technologies to enhance the capabilities of these other ecosystems, our answer is have at it. Obviously, we think that Bitcoin is the technology that we believe in. It's the one that we're prioritizing. It's the one that we're investing in. But we're building open standards and open protocols that in theory will work with all of this stuff and augment this stuff. So if there's people out there that think we're wrong in that belief that like we should be really doubling down on the Bitcoin ecosystem, and they like what we're doing with TBDEX or with Web 5, and they see some purchase in that, then go have at it. Like, we're building these things as open protocols for which you can build anything you want, really, and that could include like non-Bitcoin technology. I'm skeptical of a lot of it, but we're not building something that's like inherently like Bitcoin maxi, even though that's like where our primary focus is as a company right now.
So tell us a little bit more about TBDEX. What is it, and what innovations are right now being worked on?
Look, I think if we're going to truly realize the opportunity that's in front of us with decentralizing technology like Bitcoin, then we need to build protocols and infrastructure that is decentralized all the way down to the on-ramps and off-ramps from that ecosystem today. I mean, maybe in the future we won't need on-ramps or off-ramps because
you mean fiat on-ramps?
Yeah. I mean, like fiat is here. I mean, we I'm sure that everyone paid for their hotels and their plane tickets in dollars. I mean, people to come here, and I think that we have to accept that in the real world, people still need fiat currency to live their lives. And I know, and I'm a believer that in the future that we will have a more crypto native economy, but we're not there today. We have billions and billions of people who can't access this ecosystem very easily because you have to go through centralized KYC'd exchanges to do this. And we think that there's a better way that ultimately will give more accessible access to these technologies through the TBDEX protocol, which ultimately allows there to be a more competitive environment for providing on-ramps for stable coins and Bitcoin and yes, like other cryptocurrencies that brings a better version of identity with the self-sovereign identity and the capacity, like to do KYC where necessary, but in a privacy-preserving way where consumers own their data and are in total control of their data and don't live in centralized databases that can be extricated by hackers and fraudsters. So we think that is what needs to happen in order for us to get to the daily use case that I think everyone in this industry wants to see and that they believe in and they think will make the world better. We have to make the on-ramps and off-ramps more slippery, and we think the TBDEX protocol will do that. And we're working with many, we're working with literally like other Fortune 500 companies today. I can't speak publicly about like what who those people are, unfortunately, because of NDAs. But like we think this is the path forward. Like if we're going to be a decentralized economy, the infrastructure has to be decentralized all the way down to the on-ramps, and that's not true today. Today, the layer 2 of crypto are centralized exchanges. And that is something that has to change. And that is ultimately how we're going to shift the incentives and build a new competitive ecosystem in a decentralized world. And so that's our focus. We think that's the problem that has to be solved. It's a very, very hard problem to solve, but I think we're well positioned to solve it as a company which sits at the intersection of this new decentralized world and the traditional fiat world.
I've got to go in and kind of repeat that line. The layer 2 right now of crypto are these centralized exchanges. That sounds dangerous as heck to me.
I mean, it's true.
Yeah. And so let's talk about Web 5 again.
Yeah.
We know about the TBDEX protocol. You've talked about the decentralized identity layer. To build a new internet or to build a better internet, we're talking about a lot of moving parts. Storage, compute, connectivity at the end mile, et cetera. Are these all within Web 5? Is Web 5 a combination of these things?
It's all in there. And we're going to be like, I don't know if the website's already live or not. Is it? It is. I'm being told it is. So if you go to tbd.website/web5, you can see a full breakdown of the infrastructure that we're building. And yes, it touches on all of those points.
Okay. What are the types of things that are possible with Web 5 that aren't possible today?
I think it's very, very hard to. I mean, the biggest thing that's possible with Web 5 is ultimately the ability to own your identity and own all of the information associated with your identity and have complete control over that, and ultimately bring sort of your everything from your preferences to information about like, Daniel Buckner here, he's in the audience. He's actually our head of decentralized identity, and I would encourage people to talk to him to get into the details. But when we go to services today, we sign up for centralized services like Facebook, like Google, and all of our information has to live inside that ecosystem in order to use these services. What Web 5 ultimately lets us do is it lets us essentially own our information stores and expose that information store to applications on an as-needed basis in order for them to be able to provide like actionable services and products to us on the internet while not necessarily having to own the data. That this is like this inversion of control between hosting of data and the actual construction of applications is ultimately like the big idea that Web 5 enables. And so our TBDEX protocol is actually being built on top of this infrastructure. And so it's going to be, I guess, our ultimate like application example of how this can work, of how you can own your data. You can still interact with like service providers, in this case, like people who provision liquidity of stable coins or Bitcoins or other cryptocurrencies onto the network without ever having to hold your account data, but rather interacting with your data store that's attached to your identity that you control and can ultimately give access to or revoke access to as needed. And I think this is the information infrastructure that we believe really points us towards a believable decentralized web.
This is a really hard series of problems to solve. If I might ask, how long have you been working on it?
We've been working, specifically on this now for maybe about half a year. And we've made massive progress. We've already released our some early SDKs and APIs on how this is going to work. But we're also building on work that Daniel and people within the decentralized identity space have been working on for years. So we are standing on the shoulders of a lot of existing work that we now think is like reaching a point of maturity that we can actually build on top of and really drive it to its ultimate conclusion, which is a true decentralized web that we're calling Web 5.
Who are the types of people who should be, as of today, learning more about Web 5, potentially interacting with it, building on it?
I think everyone should be learning about Web 5.
Okay.
I think it is ultimately a set of technologies that drive better incentives towards ultimately a more competitive online economy, and will ultimately be the basis for what we all want, which is to own our identities, own our information, and ultimately not fall into the trap of large centralized platforms that I think are dangerous for human freedom long term if we don't find a way to build a more competitive internet. I don't want to like sound like a conspiracy theorist, but like
You are at a crypto conference, so that's
well, no, yeah. So, but can people imagine the power of a government seizing control of a platform like Google or Facebook and the information that would give them access to, or even Amazon AWS and being able to get access to the server infrastructure that basically runs our day-to-day
I get
lives.
concerned about the balkanization of the internet by other nations, which would be afraid of the U.S. government having control of these types of things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we think that what we're building with Web 5 is a real, well thought out infrastructure that's built on tried, tested, and true computer science that I think that people have unfortunately like fallen out of love with for reasons I don't quite understand, because I think these are really sound technological assumptions that the entire internet is built upon, and I think we can double down on those things, and we can actually build real decentralized web applications with Web 5.
Okay. Well, I'm excited to learn more about it. Mike, thanks so much for presenting this to us and announcing Web 5 to the world.
Yeah.
Web 5, everybody.
Yeah, Web 5. Web 5.